There we go. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Well, thank you everyone that's here for joining us. Thank you very much. Welcome to our tour with Alexia Breard-Anderson. We're very excited about that. I am Karina Roman. I'm the curator of the exhibition Making Spaces, and I will be helping to moderate and following up with the chat as well. And I also want to introduce Claudia, who is on the Story Gallery screen. She is the administrator of the gallery, and she will also be helping us tonight to have this running smoothly. Um, well, I would like to talk a little bit about Story Gallery for those who are not familiar with us. Um, Story Gallery is Toronto's first gallery space dedicated to the implementation of art projects that showcase and promote contemporary Latin American artistic practices. Our initiatives are aimed to innovate and to socially innovate, critically engage, um, and to lend opportunities of national relevance in order to begin to develop social global networks of exchange between artists of Latin American countries and also within the local art scene. So we are a project of LACAP, the Latin American Canadian Art Projects, and we kind of started like that, but now the gallery has started to expand itself and is kind of becoming of an entity of its own as well. And we're kind of very proud of that, and also of the programming that has been emerging along these years. Along the programming, it's also the mentorship program that is part of this exhibition. And also the tours that are coming with our different exhibitions. So talking about that, I would like to now introduce Alexia Breard-Anderson. She's also a member of the Sur family. She was former mentee in one of the mentorship programs. She's been involved and also helped with other activities. Alexia is a writer and she's also an art administrator. She's currently the director at Space Cultural Center. Uh, there, and she is there showing space. So I will encourage you all to check out some of the work she's doing in that space as well. Alexia has also worked with different initiatives that are socially engaged, and she has a very interesting practice in trying to involve more in the social sphere, contributing between like collaborations in art making, but also work with equity and care. So Alexia holds an MBA on, and yeah, I always get confused with that, but she has a degree in the arts in curatorial practices. And we're very excited to have her here also because, as usual, we have our line acknowledgement to start with our sessions, but today we're going to have a very extra special one that Alexia will be doing tonight. So with no further words, welcome Alexia. The mic is yours.
Hey, thank you, Karina, for such a nice introduction, and thank you to you and to Tamara and to Claudia for the invitation to host this tour. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It's Thursday at 7 p.m. I know it's not the most wow plan of the world, but I'm really excited to have a conversation with everybody and to share my thoughts on this exhibition. As we mentioned before, if you haven't already, put your name and pronouns in the chat and where you're tuning in from, just to get an idea of who's a part of this conversation, who's receiving this information. I find it's always helpful, especially when you're talking and you're in front of a screen, and sometimes we don't want to show our faces and stuff, but just to know who's a part of the conversation. And there will be a couple of questions and like interactive components to the tour. So you're more than welcome to participate and to refrain from doing so if you feel more comfortable doing that. So yeah, before I go into the land acknowledgement, as Karina mentioned, I think it's very cool that I'm doing this tour because it's kind of going full circle. I formed part of the mentorship program in 2015. I was gallery administrator in 2018. Tamara has been such an important mentor for me throughout my career. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to continue this relationship. And I love that it's come full circle in this way. And yes, and please, if at any point you can't hear me or you can't see me or something happens, just put it in the chat or unmute yourself, yell, and we will fix it. All right, so the land. Let's talk about the land. This land is sacred, you know, like this land has served as the home of indigenous peoples and nations long before the colonial project, like long before the Dutch, long before the French, long before the white European settlers decided to come in and found a country and make it their home as well. Um, I was called in by a good friend of mine and a colleague of mine as well earlier this year, where we were talking about land acknowledgements, and we were like, oh, how can these be written in a better way? How can we improve it? How can we make the vocabulary more inclusive and da-da-da-da, which I think is a consistent conversation, no, in the arts. And my friend really taught me something that day. They said that land acknowledgements, like in themselves, are already a failure, that there's no right way to really do a land acknowledgement because their existence already like demonstrates a failure on behalf of the Canadian government and settler society to really make adequate reparations and justice. And I feel like this really stuck with me because I find that a lot of the times we find ourselves sort of memorizing these names and sort of going into it and like, yes, these are the original territories of the Huron-Wendat, you know, of the Anishinaabeg, of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, the Métis Nation. But like, what are we actually doing to ensure those rights and to ensure the sovereignty of those nations? And like, what are we doing to dismantle systemic racism and inequity across the spectrum? What actions are we taking to end violence against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit individuals? Which are the ways in which we are calling for justice for water protectors and the gatekeepers of the land? And I feel as artists, you know, like as leaders and people who work within arts organizations, people who are interested in art and culture, we're not exempt from this responsibility, and we play a very significant role, you know, like we're gatekeepers of culture, we're storytellers, we're creatives. Our art allows us to connect histories, you know, to imagine new worlds, to change people's perspectives. And on that note, the treaty which Toronto exists on is the One Dish, One Spoon, Wampum Belt Peace Treaty. And I love this because the dish represents the land and the spoon represents our responsibility to share its gifts and resources. We never take more than we need, you know, we like pass the spoon on to whoever needs it the most in that moment. And I feel like this is what equity looks like for me. It's what collective care looks like. It's what mutual aid looks like. And this treaty is still standing, you know, and it's our responsibility to uphold it, both as Indigenous people as well as non-Indigenous and settler people. And we're going to talk a lot about positionality today. This incredible exhibition, Making Spaces, has a lot of different reflections on space and positionality and what that can look like. But I really invite you to take the time, sometime this weekend or this week, to really listen to what your Black and Indigenous peers, colleagues, family, friends, lovers are experiencing right now. Because it's heavy, it's really fucking heavy, and they shouldn't have to carry it on their own. And we have to really commit to dismantle this violence in all aspects of our lives, whatever that looks like. And that can look like having a conversation with a racist parent, you know, it can look like researching the treaties of your land. It can look like redistributing funds to initiatives like 1492 Land Back Lane. So much, I ramble, but you understand, I think what I'm trying to say. And there's so much to do and we're already late, you know, so we might as well get to it and make the best of it. And personally, as a settler, you know, like as a white passing cis woman of Argentinian descent and all the mixed ancestries that come with that I'm still discovering and figuring out. I think this treaty really informs my intention to apply this knowledge to all my everyday unlearning, you know, and to all the spaces that I take up, especially as a leader of an organization in this moment. And this shit is uncomfortable, right? It's not nice. It's not like unpacking this stuff in your body. It was never about being nice, because there's a legacy of anti-indigeneity and a legacy of anti-Blackness in the Latin American diaspora, and obviously around the world as well. That's very rampant and very alive today. And I don't know, for me, this violence is deeply embedded, you know, in my family history, in how I grew up, in how I interact and treat the people I'm with, in how I understand my body, my boundaries, my gifts, my privilege, my identity. And I think, really, to bring it back to why we're here today, I think that Making Spaces, curated by Karina, really explores a lot of these emotions, like this kaleidoscope, this complexity. And I think that the artists like Ana Luisa, Denire, Michelle, Camila, and Aline, who all identify as settlers on Turtle Island, they're really putting forth this collective intention to unpack what it means to be part of this diaspora of Latin America and Abya Yala. And like, what does it mean to connect with your idea of home and to reflect on the space that you're taking up and the space that you're reclaiming. So all of this being said, and I'm more than happy to continue. This is ongoing conversation, right? Outside of the space, wherever. Just sort of to begin the tour, I'd like to ask everybody a question. If you want to put it in the chat, you're more than welcome. If not, you can just keep it with yourself. But I'd like to ask you what makes you feel at home? Just to think about it for a little bit. Because it can look all different for everybody, right? It can be a physical space, it can be a person, it can be a sensation or a smell or a song. And if you feel called to, I invite you to write it in the chat, you know? And if you don't want to share, that's okay. Just keep that sensation with you throughout the conversation. Yes, Fiorella. Sorry, I talk so fast and I ramble. Please tell me to go slower. The question is, what makes you feel at home? Water and people I love. Yes, Karina. We're going to talk a lot about water in this exhibition. That's beautiful. The smell of the Mediterranean and my mom's voice and the smell of cafe. Yes, Ruth. It gives me goosebumps, but yes. And the ocean. For me, hands make me feel at home. Like touching someone's hands or feeling hands, and like that sort of holding comforts me in a way when I'm far away from, I guess, my homeland or motherland or however you want to call it. If anyone else wants to share, I leave it open. And if not, you can just sort of think about it as we go through and explore what all of these different artists are thinking about in terms of their home. 100% physical and verbal affection, yes. And we need it, and especially in COVID times that we're missing out on this so much sometimes, no? It's become so digital that it's tough to find new ways of caring. A good book, a blanket, a good drink. Yes, that'll be me after the tour. Yes. All right, so I'm going to begin the tour. We're going to do it virtually through the website, so you can always access it after this tour. It'll be online. Let me see, because I have to share the screen. And while I figure this out, I just want to say that something I really loved about Karina's curation of the exhibition is how she understands that a safe space is always changing and that it really depends on the individual, you know, and that we have to recognize that we all have the capacity to harm, and at the same time we all have the capacity to transform, and that our intention should lie in really being as honest and intentional as possible with our actions. And that's where community comes into play, you know. That's where there's like a care, you know, this bridge of how we exist in the world and how we exist with the people around us. So yeah, with these notions of community, of space, of home, we're going to start the tour. And I'm going to begin with Aline Seton and her piece, Toronto Boom. So Aline is a Brazilian artist. She grew up in Sao Paulo and has been very heavily influenced by that like heavy population and like fast environment that Sao Paulo was happened when she grew up there. Blah, blah, blah. And she has an interest in architecture and urbanism and nature. I'm going to play the video just because I find that she describes her work in a way that's very personable, which I enjoy. And then I'm going to give a couple of thoughts and open it up for discussion. Let me know if you can hear the sound okay.
In this installation, you'll be able to find fragments of a research that was focused around the changes that the landscape of the waterfront has gone through. So starting with the original vegetation, I moved into looking at the first maps and the ownership of the land and how the city grew to make space for the structures that are visible here today. With a focus on the architecture, I wanted to use the planes available in the room to create a composition that would become a three-dimensional collage. So I used the walls and the windows and the pillars as a support for the work. You'll see the references to the style of construction that you can see around the waterfront that is basically using steel and glass. Even with collaging, I am first looking at an image that is already done, and then I'm taking out fragments, so deconstructing it, and then building up something new from those references.
I'll leave this playing in the background so you can sort of get a gist of the 360 ambience of this piece. What I really enjoy about this work, about Toronto Boom, is that Alina's really deep attention to detail in terms of the environment that she finds herself in. Her approach is very mathematical, very architectural. She alludes to the construction boom of Toronto, which I personally think we're still in because there's construction everywhere. And I think this really suits Harborfront as a neighborhood, as a space in the city. And it's really interesting to see how Alina is exploring the ways in which settler colonialism has shaped the city planning from the beginning. I think it's very striking, and quite obvious really when you think about it a little bit more. I don't know, I personally think it's a very weird neighborhood, Harborfront. Like it's a lot of condos, that block access to the lake. It's incredibly gentrified. It's kind of tough to get to by foot. If you've ever been to Sud Gallery in person, it's kind of like a journey to get there. And when you get there, it's like, yes, it's this oasis of art next to the water. And I always think of something my mom mentioned to me when I was a kid and we were in Harborfront. And she said that the city is turning its back to the water. She said, la ciudad le da la espalda al agua. And that really stuck with me, like I feel like as a kid, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, but doesn't it make sense? Like, why wouldn't the houses be like built towards the water, facing the water, embracing the water, like creating a space where we can like gather around the water? Like even as a child, I understood that, right? And you see Harborfront today and you see how, how you wonder, right? You wonder what Harborfront looked like before colonial settlement and before all the condos went up. And you wonder, and like this piece as well, it really makes you wonder. It's like, how did it look like? How are the goods traded? Like how is the water distributed amongst communities? how did people get access to the water? And then you kind of go through these layers and you see the map and you see the blueprints, and you kind of are like zoomed back between the past and the present, and you return to the present and you look out the window and it's sort of echoed everywhere, and you're like, wow, who are these condos built for, you know? Like how are we still bulldozing oil pipelines through these communities? Like, how do people still not have access to clean water in Canada right now? How can we be close to the lake and not be able to drink it or swim in it? When did water become a privilege, you know, and not a right? And I think Alina really, really successfully sort of thinks about all of these notions in a very particular way, in a way that is in construction, that continues to be in construction. It's an ongoing exploration. It's a collage, right? She talks about the fragmentation. She talks about things coexisting and layers of history. And it struck me about this piece. And I'd love to know what people's first reactions to this piece was when they first saw it. If you saw it in person or if you're experiencing it now in the first place. Like, did you think of the city? Did you think of Harborfront? What was one word that you had for this? Also, I can't see the chat, so if you say something, I don't see it.
We'll let you know. No worries.
Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. But yeah, these were all the things that came up to me when I was oh, I did get the chat. Amazing. Frantic is a good word. It is very chaotic, but it's also like an organized sort of chaos, right? Where it's like everything is sort of like calculated to ensure like proportional, like it's a building, right? It needs the foundation of the building needs to be constructed properly for it to actually go up and to stay up and to not sway and fall in the wind. Layered as well, yeah, lots of layers. Deconstruction, just like the sites of the city. And this is a new city too, right? Like in terms of if we think about condo development and if we think about these sort of buildings and the roads and the infrastructures that have been created for us to be where we are now, it's very recent, very, very recent. And like, what is beyond those layers, right? Toronto's a city that's built on buried rivers, you know? So I feel like all these things come to mind for me. And I guess I mentioned this as well. Karina's going to be doing a curatorial tour where she further explains more of these pieces and more of these artists. I'm just coming in with all of these ideas. So just an FYI that there are going to be more ways of engaging with this work outside of my own thoughts and tour. Always open. But yeah, frantic, layered, deconstruction, water. I'm going to move into the second piece that I'm going to talk about, which is Ana Luisa's Cuerpos de Agua, Bodies of Water. And when I do so, I'm going to play a video. And the video, I'm going to let it play for around 2 minutes. And I'm going to invite you to reflect again, because I like to do that. But before I do so, Ana Luisa is wonderful. Ana Luisa is a Venezuelan multidisciplinary artist and DJ, and her current practice explores the Venezuelan migrant crisis and collective sentiments around loss and longing, which we will explore a little bit more in her work. So I'm going to play this video, which is Bodies of Water, which is part of the 3-piece install that she has up at Sur Gallery. And when I play the video, I just invite you to think about your own relationship to water. Like, what connection you feel with water? You know, like, what, are you scared of it? Does it give you calm? Are you connected with it? Are you disconnected with it? you want to share in the chat what your thoughts are, you're more than welcome. All right. All right. So what are some thoughts that came up? Let's see if I can see here. Full. Water makes you feel full. For me, it scares me. I see a big ocean and I get so scared. I have this irrational fear of drowning, even if I know how to swim. But at the same time, it gives me a sense of peace. And that coexistence of opposites is something that I really believe comes through, you know, in Anna's piece. Yeah, very sensorial, and it brings memories, swimming in water, floating in water, the sound of it, the smell of it, when you're immersed in it, when you're under, when you're swimming, you know, and you're like holding your breath and you're looking at, I don't know if you can open your eyes underwater, I can't, but there are people that can, which I think is really cool. It's beautiful, and water is life, right? Water is sacred. Water is our elder. Water is a life force. And something that I really love about this video piece is how much of you can really see how much of a ritual it is for Anna to return to the water. Or at least for me, that's how I see it. And I think it's written about, I think Karina, you write about it in the essay as well. It's a ritual. Yeah, the feeling of sand under your feet, that's true. Sort of the walking and like knowing how you can't really run on sand. You kind of have to take it easy because running, or when the sand is hot and you have to run because that shit's gonna burn your feet. I love being on boats, says Jose. Makes me think that my love for it comes being in ferries and boats in Venezuela. But like, you can't swim comfortably in open water. Yeah, so the idea of a boat, kind of, you're contained, right? On this like infinity expansion of the unknown. Ferries and peñeros. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not Venezuela, but I see this. It's protective, water's protective, water's healing, right? Water's the first thing we do when we have a wound or when we're dehydrated, when we're sick. Drink water, put water on it. Let me just grab. This piece is gorgeous. This is a cyanotype on cotton fabric. And this piece really makes me think about alchemy, you know, about the transmutation of elements. And like, if you think about it on a metaphysical level, water represents our emotions as well, right? The currents that we experience, the cyclical nature. It's never like good or bad, or it's always this like place in between. And I think that Anna's connection to water and ultimately to the coastline, no, of Venezuela and the Caribbean really comes through in these pieces. And something that I really love about this one is the chemical reaction, no? Like the way in which this piece was created was activated by the sun. And it's this embodiment of alchemy, I think. And I have a writing that Anna shared in her statement that I'd love to share with you while I play this other video in the background, where Anna says, I hope I say it correctly, when I am away from it, the tie that binds my body with the land is not broken, but rather transformed and reconfigured. The tie that binds my body with the land is not broken, but rather transformed and reconfigured. And I think that's such a beautiful way of expressing the feeling that many Latinx artists in the diaspora feel, you know, like being away from home, because we're consistently trying to recreate these spaces of belonging outside of where we're from and outside of where our roots are from. And I'll play this video piece as well. I'll keep the volume a bit low because I feel like, but this piece talks to that. It talks about the roots. You know, this is a VHS sort of recording that on a digitalized, and it's filmed by close family friends of hers about 20 years ago. I think it says 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And it speaks to this intergenerational connection, you know, to this ancestry, to this memory, to this connection that is so tough to come to terms with when you're physically distanced from it, but you know that it's there. And then you kind of go and you search through the archives and it is there. And whether or not there's video proof of it or evidence or tangible, something that you can touch, you know that it's there. And it's comforting in a way. And also sad. No, it's like all the emotions at the same time. And this piece I love, this like family video type footage that you suddenly find hidden, and then you need to find a VHS player to actually play it. I think it's quite sacred, especially nowadays that everything is so quick and like we film like 10-second videos and it's over. And here it's just sort of like you really get the sensation of what it means to be by the beach. And look at the amount of people. Do you imagine now with COVID? Not doable. Okay, let me close this one. I hope I'm doing these pieces justice. I really do. My intention is to just, I guess, share my thoughts on how these pieces have resonated with me. And I feel as well like this Cuerpos de Agua, Bodies of Water by Ana, much like with Aline, it kind of makes you travel through time, you know? It kind of makes you go back and forth in cycles instead of just a line. It's not like a linear time. There's no beginning or end. It's a consistent circle. It's like you're existing and you're not existing at the same time. And it's like super trippy. Anyway, yeah, people together. What a concept. What a concept. One day, friends, will be able to get together again in person. All right, so on this notion of nonlinear circular time and memory, I'm gonna bring us into Denide's piece. I'm gonna bring you right through here. And I'm going to play the first part of the video. Denide also explains a little bit of the art making and the background of the piece. And then I'm gonna give a couple of thoughts and open up a discussion.
Bringing together hand weaving and materiality with digital media is an incredibly enticing challenge to me. The two seemingly different mediums act as metaphor while I travel between worlds. I've interpreted pre-Columbian, pre-contact textiles from Latin America into this short animation you can watch as it climbs upwards as if I were actually the one weaving it. Interrupting the imagery are these elusive cubes. They reference the woven structure, plain blocks, and pixels. With this install, I explore the notions of play, discovery, and cultural context. I wonder what parts or how much of culture and our beings are inherent, learned, or adapted. What parts can we honor and which no longer fit into our futures? Having grown up between contexts has seared into me impressions of cultural knowledge, but they live on loan, belonging to no one and all of us.
All right, so I'm gonna just leave this to play in the background a bit so you can sort of experience the projection mapping that Denide has done here. So Denide, I forgot to do the introduction, but is a Venezuelan-born Canadian-based artist whose work is largely influenced by being an immigrant and living as part of the Venezuelan diaspora. And as an artist, her material focus is exploring textiles through a spatial, interactive, and interdisciplinary lens. This piece itself is called Low New Context. And I would love to know what resonated from this piece from you. You know, like I think that there's such a deep poetry in this installation. I think that it really speaks to this. I'm just gonna play it again so you can look at it again because it's pretty. I think that the ideas, I think that there's an inherent world building that BIPOC artists and Latinx artists have, you know, like to be able to merge tradition with futurisms and create a new space wherever they find themselves. And I think this piece really evokes that for me. And the word limbo keeps coming back, you know, like what does it mean to be stuck between the past and the future? What does it mean to be overwhelmed by the past and by the future at the same time? Like how it almost causes this like need to release, you know, to surrender, to give in, to create in this case. And I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine. This is related, where I asked her what techniques she had to connect with her ancestors. And I told her, I was like, I'm having a hard time meditating. I don't want to disturb my ancestors. I'm sure they're really busy. They have things to do. But I just wanted to know that they're there and they're present with me. And like, I just asked her, what do you do? And she said that our ancestors are present in every action that we take, regardless of whether we're actively looking for them or not. So whether that means cooking, you know, or weaving like Denire does, or putting your hands in soil, that movement, that muscle memory, that it's blood memory, right? And they accompany us through that. Singing, dancing, humming, when you remember a song, you know, dreaming. And it was comforting to hear this, because I find that a lot of the artists in this exhibition and a lot of the ideas that are explored is about really feeling lost, you know, feeling a bit uncertain, feeling shame perhaps for having lost the connection with our ancestry, having this sort of mentality of scarcity, of not being enough, you know, that always comes back. Like, I'm not, I don't know, Latina enough. I'm not like Argentinian enough. I'm not Venezuelan enough. I'm not, and it's complicated, right? Like ancestries are complicated, families are complicated. Intergenerational trauma is something that we all carry, and there are wounds and knots that we have to spend lifetimes healing, right? And all of these things for me came up with Denida's piece. I was like, holy shit, and these pixels and this projection mapping. But it's worth it, I think, to do this work. And I think a huge part of it is, like, I return to what I was talking about at the beginning, is really seeing how that violence is embodied, you know, like how it shows up in your body, how it shows up in your thought patterns and in your habits. But yeah, I'm intrigued to know, like, what did you think about this piece? How did it resonate with you? Can't see the chat. Where's the chat? There it is. Jose, I never thought about this, but the pixel structure of the projected images so closely resembles woven materials. The repetition, the grid, the accumulation of small parts to make a larger whole. Totally, absolutely. And Denire was really exploring these ideas very intentionally, right? I remember being in a shared virtual event with her, and she was listening to music and weaving these squares together. And it does tell stories. The patterns in which it's done. Sorry, I'm just gonna plug my computer in so I don't run out of battery. But yeah, Jose, thank you for sharing. It's very true. Very, very true. All right. Wow, the time is flying. Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to continue the tour into the next piece of the exhibition, which is White Sister, Brown Sister by Michelle Peraza. Michelle Peraza, Ontario-based emerging artist of Cuban and Costa Rican descent. And this piece is made up of two large-scale, hyper-realistic portraits in which Michelle has painted her two sisters looking at each other. Michelle has always sort of centered portraiture in her work and has done it very intentionally, you know, as a way of really disrupting the whiteness that is prevalent in portraiture, and creating a critical visibility of brown bodies and faces. And something that I really admire about her practice is her approach. It's very brave, it's very personal. All of the people, I think majority, if not everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, is family members of your family. Yeah, and the work that comes with that, right? If we're on the topic of learning and unlearning and connecting to roots, it's not only this abstract idea that we have of ancestry or a metaphoric symbolic connection we have with the land, which is all incredibly valid, but it's also those face-to-face conversations and that time spent together. And I think that this piece, although it's quite subtle, it's beautifully done. I want to see if I can zoom. Can I zoom in on this? I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, look at that. Look at those details. Oh, hi. Okay, I don't know what I did, but I was trying to zoom in on the details. But I think that this piece really speaks on the deeply rooted internalized racism and colorism that exists within families across the Latin American diaspora. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, you know, and it's blatant. Anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, colorism, blatant. You know, like I think of the caste system that was created specifically to distinguish and segregate social classes according to race. I think of this like illusion that some of our parents and grandparents have of white superiority, you know, and how like obvious it is that your proximity to whiteness will afford you less discrimination and greater opportunities. It's disgusting. I think of like even just the term Latin America itself, which I'm really trying to like unlearn and unpack. Like it's a very recent term. It was coined 150 years ago by some like French emperor who invaded Mexico and wanted to create some sort of connection between Europe and this Abya Yala, and called it America, like Latin America. And this piece by Michelle, where you have the white sister and the sister who has darker skin looking at each other, this tension, you know, you can feel it. You can feel it. And I think also of like who is even permitted the access to represent Latin America in art spaces, you know, and like how much of this representation is centered in whiteness and our proximity to it. And like it makes me think of my own positionality, you know, as a white passing woman. It makes me think of how dismantling racism, you know, it's lifelong work, and it's forming part of these conversations and looking at your family and starting from the root, from the center, which is all you have sometimes. And how much this extends into any space that you walk into, you know, any space that you take up, any artwork that you create. And I want to thank Michelle, because I think that this piece, perhaps at first glance, you're sort of, it catches your attention, right? Just because of the way, let's see if I can zoom into this one. The detail is incredible and it's large scale. But then when you sort of go back and look at the larger, look at the interaction that's happening, I think it's very telling. It's very telling of what's happening right now, and of a responsibility to act upon it. And I'm interested as well in seeing what folks thought of this piece. I felt uncomfortable. I was like, oh my God, holy shit, she captured it. Yeah. And we can continue. I can talk about the last piece, Camila's piece, and then if there's time, what time? Yeah, we can just sort of chat at the end, if that's okay with everybody. What did I do? Oh no. My bad. Sorry, I return. Okay. I see. Fiorella. I'm pretty light skinned now since living in Canada, but siblings used to joke I was adopted because my skin was darker than theirs. Whoo, that's intense. That's definitely intense. And there's an interesting conversation between them, and I feel like an intrude, says Ruth. Yeah. It's a very personal it's really deep, the emotions, no, and the reactions that come up. Okay, I'm gonna go into Camis, which is the last one, and then leave a little bit of space open for chatting. So I'm just gonna play this video in the background. I don't think it has sound, but just so you can see. So the last piece I'm gonna share with you guys today is Choose Your Mask by Camila Salcedo, who's from Caracas, Venezuela. And Camila is an interdisciplinary artist, activist, and community organizer who explores art making via various mediums, performance, video, textiles, curation, etc. And for this piece, Camila designed an Instagram filter, which allows the user to sort of tap through different masks. So you're gonna see the COVID mask, you know, the face shield, as well as protest masks in solidarity with Black Lives Matter that said, I can't breathe, and aborto legal ya, legal abortion now. However, these messages were deemed too violent by Instagram and the filter had to be adapted, and Cami had to take the text out in order for the filter to be approved. And here you can sort of see different friends and peers and colleagues of Cami sort of interacting with the filter. And I think this piece is very telling of the times that we're in right now. You know, like I don't know about you guys, but I have such a mixed feeling about this upsurge of social media activism. And I think Cami captures it really well in this piece. Like if you are on social media, if you are on Instagram, there's all these like beautiful infographics, you know, like calls to action, and it's very scary how quickly white people really rushed to post all of these black squares. Remember a couple of months ago? And then how quickly corporations were like putting up all of these solidarity BLM statements and then never following up with tangible action. And how quickly this urgency, you know, this urgency really dissolved into complete passivity. And I don't know, like I have an interesting relationship with social media. I feel like I recognize how important of a tool it is for communication, you know, for knowledge exchange, for research, for gathering, for getting people together, for redistributing funds. But I think it's also really frustrating to see how many people fall into this passive, like, oh, I posted a meme, I've done my work, I don't need to do anything else, you know? And also like how desensitized we become to as consumers, you know, of like violent content and violent media. So I don't find it surprising that IG said that this text was too violent, you know, especially since it has a history of like silencing and invisibilizing the voices and bodies of anyone who isn't like a white, cis, straight man. But yeah, I'm really intrigued what you think of this piece. I think it speaks very well with Michelle's. And I'm just I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think of all the pieces. And it's 7:53, so if you have any questions about anything or any thoughts or comments about anything, I would love to hear. In the gallery, there are 2 videos. It's a diptych. There is a diptych. My bad. Here.
Yeah, so in the gallery, you will be able to see like a sort of parallel between the censored and the uncensored version. And also, well, of course, if you go to our website, you will get the link to access the filter as well.
You can have it here. The QR. Ruth says, I'm interested in the playful and at the same time punch in the face part of the piece. Yeah. Yeah. The irony comes through in a way, right? See if I can get a full view from this angle. And I really recommend, if you haven't been in person and if you have the capacity and access to do so, to check out the show in person. It's really wonderful. But this virtual exhibition tour is incredible. Fiorella, just to take a step back, it's amazing to me that filters really are art and that we are living amongst them, not considering that. Yeah. Wild. The fact that the artwork works beyond itself is in the public too. The participatory aspect of it. And something so cotidiano, I don't know if quotidian is a word in English, but something so everyday, you know, like so that we take for granted in a way, or that we become so accustomed to. And when I say we, I feel like I'm also kind of limiting myself generationally, but I don't want to do that. But I feel like I've had both the pre-social media and the current social media. Whereas, I don't know, my brother, who's like 5 years later, he does not grow up. He's always had a computer available to him at some point. And he grew up with internet and the video games and everything. So it's really strange. And it's really interesting to think when we talk about activism, right? And when we talk about organizing. And when we look, like, if we go back to these masks, right? Like, these movements that Cami is representing and these filters is no joke, right? These are massive. Like the call for legal abortion throughout Latin America, huge. Like Black Lives Matter, and it's infiltrating all of the systems that we navigate. And I guess my to bring it back to the beginning, my question is like, how does this relate to us? How does this relate to you personally? How does this relate to your roots and what you have to share? And what do you commit to in forming part of that? What's your role within that?
Breard has an interesting question in the chat. It is, what is the conversation between the pieces? And I would be kind of interested in, you already kind of went through the flow, kind of following the curatorial essay, but to you, after having experienced this and also after doing the tour itself, what is the conversation again after that? What's going on between the pieces?
Yeah. I think it's a conversation of internal exploration that's sort of mirroring itself through different mediums and through different ways. You have Aline that has like this land and this construction and this foundation, and like what happens when you construct a city, when you construct an identity, when it's fragmented. You have Anna who's sort of like approaching it through a flow, through a returning of going back and forth. You have Michelle and Denire who are sort of like taking out the roots from their family and like putting it into the public, but also transmuting it and creating installations out of it. You have Camila who's taking all of that and bringing it into the public. I tend to ramble, but I think that the conversations between the pieces for me looks like a sort of a collective intention to continue uprooting and to continue understanding our individual positionality within the world as members of the Abya Yala diaspora, and like unpacking all of that, all of the issues and all of the complexities that come with that. And I hope I do it justice by saying this, but that's what I believe. What do you think, Ruth? Or anybody?
Do I talk?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
of course.
sure.
I am very interested in the fact that everything is very squarey and lined, but the portraits are circular. So there is a very interesting conversation, not only in the different techniques, but also in the format. As this piece is in the center of the gallery, and the other pieces are like facing it, but well, it's like a tension. They are very full of tension, but at the same time, it's a familiar conversation. Like when two siblings they fight between them, but you cannot punch them because they will fight against you. It's like, no, a mi hermano solo le pego yo. I don't know how to say that in Spanish.
You defend your siblings always. If somebody else says anything, then you get mad, but you are allowed.
Don't you dare touch my sister.
Yeah, but I like that kind of conversation that I feel like those all the pieces are in the dialogue between them, but at the same time they don't talk to each other. I don't know if I am explaining myself. It's more like a secret code. It's not a loud conversation. It's more like a whisper. And well, and the position of the pieces in the space for me is very interesting because of I don't remember the names of the artists, sorry, but the first piece, this one, the one, yes, and the one in the room are very connected in shape. They are very angular, and they are in the extreme of the space, like in the poles. So it's curious for me because the space is creating a tension at the same time. Then the dialogue is also tense. Maybe I'm like flying my head, but that's what I feel. It's curious because also this piece, Michelle's piece, in front of the waves. The waves are also randy, right? I mean, it's something sinuous at the same time that the conversation is also underwater. I don't know. Maybe I am connecting things that are not connected, but
I think that it's completely valid. I love it. I think it's a really poetic way of like looking at not only the individual pieces, but the actual curation of the space as a whole. Really, really insightful.
Are there any more comments or questions for Alexia? Thank you, Ruth, for your participation. And yes, you can also ask me those questions in the next tour as well. We can discuss that. But thank you so much for those insights. And well, I think that since there are no more questions in the chat, we can wrap up this session. Thank you so much, Alexia. It was lovely to hear your perspective on the exhibition. I know you've worked also with some of the artists, so I really appreciate like having that like background knowledge about not only Sur but also following the artist's trajectories as well. Thank you again, everybody who was here joining us in this tour, and we invite you to join also the other tour that I will be doing in person. So this one will be shorter tour as well, but it's going to be on site, and you will need to schedule a booking with Claudia. And we'll also, of course, keep in mind whatever the security and safety guidelines will be at the time for that as well. And we'll have also an upcoming artist panel with all of the artists, so then you can also ask them your questions about their practice, their artwork, and of course about the work included in this exhibition. So I will encourage everybody to sign up for that on our website. Thank you again, everybody, and have a good night yourselves. Bye.
Bye, everyone.